Mike had always been a thrill seeker, someone who sought adventure where others feared to go. This time, it was no different. When his group of hiking friends suggested an expedition to an obscure, off-the-beaten-path mountain trail in the wilderness of northern Oregon, Mike couldn't resist. The rumors about the location made it even more enticing. The secluded trails, the eerie silence, and the mystery surrounding the area were all too tempting. There were tales of people who had gone missing there, but Mike brushed them off as folklore. The group for this adventure was smaller than usual. Just Mike, Sarah, Paul, and Jessica. They'd been friends for years, bonded over their shared love of hiking, climbing, and adventure. They had heard about this remote mountain trail from a fellow hiker who described it as unexplored beauty that ended in breathtaking views of the surrounding. After a grueling 8-hour hike, the group set up camp near the base of a steep cliff that towered over the dense forest. The day had been exhausting, but the scenery was worth every step. Crisp fall air surrounded them as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor. As dusk approached, they gathered around the fire, enjoying the last light of the day while swapping stories and jokes. That's when they heard the scream ... It pierced the calm, peaceful atmosphere like a knife, echoing through the valley. A woman's scream, high-pitched, terrified, and unmistakable. The group fell silent, their laughter fading. They exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if what they heard was real or just a figment of their imagination. "Did you guys hear that?" Sarah whispered. "Yeah," Mike replied, his voice barely audible. "But there's no one else supposed to be out here, right?" Before anyone could answer, the scream came again, louder this time, closer. It wasn't just a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure terror. Mike's heart raced as the sound sent chills down his spine. Whoever it was, they were in serious trouble. Paul stood up, instinctively reaching for the flashlight in his pack. "We have to go check it out. Someone's out there, and they need help." Reluctantly, the rest of the group agreed. They quickly grabbed their gear and headed into the forest, following the faint echoes of the scream. The moon provided only a dim glow through the canopy of trees, and their flashlights cut through the darkness like weak beams in an abyss. The farther they went, the thicker the silence became, save for the rustling of leaves beneath their feet. Who would be out here in the middle of nowhere? Jessica muttered, her voice shaky, "I don't know." Mike replied, "But we're gonna find out." They hiked for what felt like an eternity, but the screams stopped. The forest seemed to close in on them, and Mike's gut told him something was wrong, very wrong. Just as they were about to turn back, the group stumbled upon something none of them had expected, a cave entrance, barely visible through the thick undergrowth. A strange buzzing noise emanated from inside. "This is insane. Should we go in?" Sarah asked, her face pale under the flashlight beam. Mike, always the bold one, stepped forward. "We've come this far. Let's see what's inside." Against their better judgment, the group followed him into the cave. It was narrow at first, the walls closing in around them as they ventured deeper. The buzzing grew louder, more erratic. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped, and the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. As they rounded a corner, the cave opened up into a vast chamber. And there, in the dim light of their flashlights, they saw it, a figure crouched in the darkness. A woman, her back turned to them, huddled against the wall. "Hey, are you okay?" Mike called out, his voice echoing through the cavern. The woman didn't respond. She just sat there, motionless. Paul stepped forward, his flashlight beam landing on her shoulder. "Ma'am, do you need help?" Slowly, unnaturally, the woman began to turn her head. But something was wrong. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet being manipulated by invisible strings. As her face came into view, the group recoiled in horror. Her eyes were wide and vacant, her mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. There was something inhuman about her. Before anyone could react, the woman let out a blood-curdling shriek and lunged toward them. Panic set in as they scrambled to retreat. Mike shouted at the others to run, but in the chaos, he tripped over a loose rock, tumbling to the ground. The woman was on him in seconds, her cold, clammy hands wrapping around his throat. Paul and Sarah grabbed him by the arms, pulling him to his feet. Together, they sprinted out of the cave, the woman's shrill laughter echoing behind them. As they reached the entrance, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps closing in multiple footsteps. "Go! Go!" Mike yelled, pushing his friends ahead of him. They ran through the forest, their flashlights barely illuminating the path. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, closer. Mike's lungs burned, his heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't dare stop. Whatever had been in that cave wasn't human, and it was coming for them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they broke through the tree line and stumbled back into their campsite. They collapsed, gasping for air, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. We can't stay here," Jessica panted, her eyes wide with terror. "We have to go. Now." Without a word, they grabbed their bags and fled, leaving behind their tents, their gear, and any semblance of safety. The feeling of being watched never left them as they made their way back to civilization. They didn't stop until they reached the car. It wasn't until they were safely miles away that Mike realized what had happened: the woman in the cave. She had been waiting for them, and he had made the fatal mistake of answering her call.